Alright, what is going on everyone? It is Foul Play here and welcome back to another modern set review of the full set of Strixhaven. So I like to do this with most sets that come out if I think they're going to make an impact on the modern metagame. So we'll go through a few cards. We'll let you know what to look out for, what you might want to be purchasing, things like that, what might help your archetype. So there are some pretty powerful cards in here, and I am sort of reminded a little bit of the power level of Throne of Eldraine with some of them, which is a little bit scary. So definitely stick around towards the end if you want to find out all the spicy detail. There's some very strong stuff in there, and I'm going to be leaving a few of them towards the end there. I will start by saying that today's video for Modern isn't going to be happening. Normally I'd have a daily video up, sorry. Technical difficulties of I entered a league and did my deck tech, entered the league, started recording, and I'm playing Merfolk, not Bogles, because it automatically loaded the wrong deck, a deck that I haven't touched or played in like over 6 months. So it's sort of out of date and stuff, but we did get a win against M. Haishi, which is pretty sweet. Essentially a blue-black Merfolk deck. We got some Wonderwine hubs in there to help cast Luris. But yeah, kind of sweet. Alright, so first card off the bat now, guys. Charge Through. Alright, so this one is similar to Crash Through, which we've seen before in Mono Red Prowess decks. Except this one is instant speed, which is a pretty significant upgrade. Target creature gets trample until end of turn, draw a card. Also has really cool Quidditch inspired artwork in my opinion, although I can't see any broomsticks, which is a little bit disappointing. Also for us Bogle players, we got like absolutely nothing. We got completely gypped again. No surprises there. So sorry guys, we're going to have to pick it up another time, I guess. Look forward to another future set for maybe something of a significant power level. Now this is sort of like an interesting card. So you've got a 4-mana Merfolk here, which is a 2/2. When it enters the battlefield, exile an instant or sorcery card from your graveyard. Put any number of 1/1 counters on it equal to half the card's converted mana value rounded up. So they've changed mana cost to mana value now. So really the only place I see this getting sort of played is maybe in like the Is It Burnfolk that Nikachu runs around and plays. Just mostly like maybe as a 1 or 2 of on the top end. The red side's sort of interesting. Discard a card, then draw a card. When you discard an instant or sorcery this way, it deals damage equal to that card's converted mana cost to target creature or planeswalker you control. So I guess it's a way for them to throw like a 2-mana stomp at a planeswalker or something. It's going to do it anyway, but you can loot at the same time with a creature. It's just when you give like a dual face card like this, you get the extra option. Sort of powers it up a little bit, but at sorcery speed, which is kind of weak. I don't think it's going to be a staple in the archetype, but I think people are going to try it and play with it, and they're probably going to get over it and not really do it anymore. Alright, so this is a really cool card. I think it's going to be a sideboard card if anything. So Fracture for 1 white, 1 black. Instant speed. Destroy target artifact, enchantment, or planeswalker. So it hits some pretty key things. It doesn't hit creatures though. Having said that, being able to hit both any out of artifacts, enchantments, or planeswalkers is pretty strong. It's an effect we haven't seen before. For just 2 mana at instant speed, I think some black-white decks, maybe even the Esper control deck that Johansson, whatever his name, Yendrick is playing, might pick up a few copies of this in the sideboard. Really, really strong card. Definitely, I guess, be prepared for it. Alright, now this is an interesting one. So I've read this card like 6 times, and I just can't place a deck that would want it. But it's got like multiple really powerful effects, and I think someone's going to find a way to abuse it and break it eventually, if that makes sense. So Miller the Crafty Companion is a 3-mana 2/3 wolf. Whenever an opponent attacks 1 or more planeswalkers you control, put a loyalty counter on each planeswalker you control. So that's kind of interesting. So a control deck with planeswalkers sort of could be a blocker that disincentivizes attacking. Probably control decks wouldn't want this though, because they have lots of removal, they have other ways to block creatures. This doesn't proactively progress their board state or anything like that. So I don't think it's really going to go into a control deck. All right, so let's read the next part. Whenever a permanent you control becomes the target of a spell or an ability an opponent controls, you may draw a card. That's pretty good. I like drawing cards. Card drawing is good when my opponent is interacting with me, right? Like, you can just flood the crap out of your opponent value-wise. All right, so the other side of it is pretty expensive. It's a 6-mana Planeswalker. You may discard a card if you do draw a card. If a creature was discarded this way, you draw 2 cards instead. So that's just a +1. He starts at 5 loyalty. He does start pretty high. The next 2 is where it gets interesting, though. Return target creature from your graveyard to the battlefield. It gains haste. Exile it at the beginning of the next upkeep. So, like, classically, like, you'll see, like, the 5-mana Through the Breach, Emrakul deck, shoot out an Emrakul, attack your opponent. You won't really be able to do this because it's an activated ability at sorcery speed. And Emrakul has a trigger of when it enters the graveyard, you shuffle the graveyard into your library. You could, however, get something like a Gristlebrand back, attack, gain a bunch of life. I don't know. I think it's one to sort of keep in the back of your mind. Maybe if it drops to like a cheap card, you can pick it up, like a couple of bucks a card or 50 cents a card. I think it might have its place in the future, but not anytime soon, right? Very, very powerful effects. And then for next 7, you get an emblem with whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, it deals damage equal to its power to any target. So start fireballing your opponent in the face for, 7 and things like that. All right, so this is where it gets interesting. So at first glance, you might think this card's a little bit silly, and I might be stretching this a little bit. So Baletul Mastery is a 4-mana instant in black coloring. So the interesting part is you may pay 2 mana instead of 4 mana though. And if you do that, an opponent gets to draw a card. So what's the effect of the spell, whether it resolves at 2 mana or 4 mana? So you exile a target creature or planeswalker. So this is a way to interact with target creature or planeswalker of any converted mana cost for 2 mana. And it's exiled. There's a lot of creatures that go to the graveyard. They might come back. They might add value to your opponent's deck in some sort of way. Obviously, there's things like Lurrus. There's other things like Scavenging Ooze that can eat them. There's Tarmogoyf that gets buffs, etc., etc. The list goes on. So at instant speed for 2 mana, you can exile target creature or planeswalker, and the downside is your opponent might draw a card. If you, like, kill a Jason, your opponent gets to draw a card. I mean, it seems strong to exile both a creature and a planeswalker of any converted mana cost. I guess, like, planeswalker disruption is still sort of, like, new, but, like, and getting the exile is probably not that relevant because most of them don't come back from the graveyard. But it's a very interesting card design, and I think it's actually stronger than what a lot of people are going to be giving it credit for, personally. 2 mana for this effect seems pretty good to me. No converted mana cost restrictions or anything. The only downside is your opponent draws a card if you play it for 2 mana instead of 4. But, I think it's definitely worth the downside for the power of the effect. All right, now this is sort of like an interesting one. I think maybe like a Blue Moon deck or something might look to adopt Rowan Scholar or Spark. So it has an asymmetrical effect of instant and sorceries spells you cast cost 1 generic less to cast. That's definitely something like a control deck might be a little bit more interested in. And it's a dual-sided planeswalker as well, which is great. So if you have 2 copies in the deck, you might get 1 out as Ron, 1 out as Will. And then your instants and sorceries cost 2 generic less to cast, which is, again, quite interesting. Now, Rowan's Plus is like the main strong ability I sort of see here. It being like the 3 mana side of the planeswalker is probably the more likely thing to be getting cast. So it deals 1 damage to each opponent. If you've drawn 3 or more cards this turn, deals 3 damage to each opponent instead. So why is this important? I mean, like Jace, draw 3 cards, put 2 cards back, then you're shooting your opponent in the face for 3 off of just a +1 on this planeswalker that you got out on turn 3. It seems like a pretty good mirror breaker for Blue Moon versus other control decks to me. If you do that into a Jace, like your opponent's going to have to do something about that card value and that free damage. It's pretty reckoning. Okay, then for -4, you get an emblem with whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, you may pay 2. If you do, copy that. So you get to copy instant and sorcery spells, which can be pretty handy as well. You can imagine getting like double cryptic commands, double counter spells, and a counter spell battle. I've seen lots of matches of control players being like, I've got nothing left. I've got mana, but I've only got lands in hand. I can't do anything with the remaining land on the board. They've got like 5 mana up and they can't counter anything. Like, hey, look, if you get an emblem which lets you copy your instant and sorcery spells, that's pretty strong. All right, so Will the Scholar of Frost. Again, the same asymmetrical passive. Will stack with Rowan's. So it has a... Is it Pongify effect on it? I think would be the word. Up to one target creature has base power of toughness of 0-2 until your next turn. So it can nullify a creature. It is a 5 mana planeswalker though, so that's sort of expensive for like just tapping down a creature each turn, sort of, kind of. But interesting. It has a -3 of draw 2 cards. Yeah, there's definitely... It's always good to have a draw mode on like your blue planeswalkers in these control decks, right? And you can do it as soon as you play it. And its ultimate exile up to 5 target permanents. For each permanent exiled this way, its controller creates a 4/4 blue and red elemental creature token. So I guess it's a win condition as well once you hit that neg 7. I don't think it's like super playable or like super amazing, but I think it's an interesting tool for Blue Moon, and mostly just the 3 mana planeswalker into the 4 mana Jace is really what's sort of selling me on this card, and why I think it might be strong in Blue Moon. All of the rest is like just added bonus, but I mostly think the 3 mana planeswalker would be getting play in that situation. All right, so rip apart. Very strong card. This is a tool for red, white burn, Boros burn. As Travis Cook says, it has some great artwork. Let's just take a moment to enjoy the beautiful artwork there. It's actually a very spicy design. I like this alternate artwork as well. With instead of the white text box, you get this Boros themed text box. That's really cool. All right, so it can remove a creature, 3 damage to target creature or planeswalker. So this is interesting, and destroy target artifact or enchantment. So for 2 mana, you get your sideboard card, which destroys target artifact or enchantment. It takes a slot of Wear Tear, but on top of that, it also interacts with creatures and planeswalkers. I'd say it's a pretty significant upgrade to Wear Tear. Pretty like, you know, I think just the versatility of it being able to go after creatures and planeswalkers on top of the artifacts and enchantments, very strong, very strong. So I think you're going to be seeing a bit of play from this. It's uncommon, so definitely pick them up while you can. All right, now this, in my opinion, is the strongest card in the set. They've printed a bunch more commands here. All right, so what's this one do? It only costs 2 mana to cast. You can only cast it at sorcery speed, though. That is the downside. So black and green. Target player mills 3 cards, then return a land card from your graveyard to your hand. Okay. So getting a land back is obviously reminding me of something like Ren and 6. And if your opponent stacks cards on top of their library, you can mill them away. Sort of interesting. What else does it do? Destroy target non-creature, non-land permanent with confirmed mana cost of 2 or less. So it's an answer to your opponent's Ren and 6. That's kind of interesting. It also interacts with, you know, artifacts, enchantments, things like that. So yeah, interesting. Target creature gets -3, -1 until end of turn. Okay, so it can kill 1 toughness creature, more 1 toughness creature, hey, and target opponent loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. Yeah, look, I think this is going to get a lot of play, like sort of like Golgari Charm, but I think it's been upgraded a little bit. You've got an extra mode. There's no like full board sweep effect. You getting your land back, like imagine casting this on curve against a creature based deck, right? They play their 1-drop, Your turn. You play Witherbloom. You kill their 1-drop because it only has 1 toughness. Pretty much all 1-drops in Modern have 1 toughness, except for the prowess ones. Even then, it's good tempo there. You then can, mill some cards from your opponent, return a land, guarantee your land drop for your next turn or for a few turns down the line. Or if you're versing burn, you can drain some life, which is pretty nice. Yeah, I think this card's pretty strong, pretty versatile, and going to see a lot of play. The only downside is sorcery speed, which might affect that a little bit, but I think because of how cheaply it's costed, it's probably just going to be good value most of the time. All right, now we're coming to another interesting card, and like a lot of these cards have a lot of text on them, so I like reading through it slowly, breaking it really down. And I think a lot of the times you might be like, oh, this text isn't like self-synergistic. But a lot of the times it doesn't matter. If it has just one really, really strong keyword of text on there, which is going to make it very powerful, then the other text doesn't really matter. It's just there to confuse your opponent. All right, so for 1 mana, you get a Vampire Warlock with Menace and Lifelink. The non-token creature an opponent controls would die. Exile it instead. I really like that keywording on there. So your opponent's creatures get exiled, which is very important for various matchups in Modern. All right, so when you do, you may pay 2. If you do, you create a 1/1 black green pest creature token with when it dies, you gain 1 life. All right, that's kind of cool. I think like a vampire deck could pretty easily pick this up. It's got Menace, which is strong. It's got Lifelink, which is good, and it's got interaction of making your opponent's creatures that die exile instead of coming back. It's really good for like things with persist, undying, negating Scavenging Ooze, Shrinking Tarmogoyfs, things like that. All right, now the other side of this is for 4 mana, and it's a human druid. The only like downside about these things is like the creature typing is always different between these cards. Like this is supposed to be like another tribal set, I believe, and really the tribal decks haven't got the love for me as much as like all those non-creature spells I just showed you, right? But yeah, whenever you gain life, you may pay 1. If you do, put a 1/1 counter on each creature you control, and those creatures gain trample until end of turn. I think that side's sort of less likely to do stuff. I think in a vampire deck, though, that's pretty synergistic with what they do, because they sort of like sack stuff, gain life, deal damage, go pretty crazy. So if like vampires can splash to green-black or maybe green-black-white, Abzan, then this could be a card that gets an inclusion. A lot of these decks trouble with not having 1-drops. Obviously, like a weakness of this card as well is like 1 toughness on its front side, and the back side doesn't have vampire typing, which is really annoying, but it's also kind of a strong effect. So it's sort of a funny card. I don't quite know where to paste it, but I recognize a lot of strong keywording there with the text. So yeah, we'll point it out to you all anyway. All right, moving on. All right, so Spirits. Spirits has got a very powerful card here. So this Spirit does not have flying. It will be attacking on the ground. It has Vigilance, Trample, so it also doesn't have First Strike. So you'd have to splash into red to be playing this, but you get a Vigilance, Trample, 3/3 Spirit. With when it deals combat damage to a player, you may return target creature card with converted mana cost of X or less from your graveyard to the battlefield, where X is the amount of damage it dealt to that player. Are you kidding me? Spirits gets to reoccur other spirits now from the grave. That is huge. That is very strong. Obviously, this happens post damage on your attack step, so you can't exactly exploit it to get Spell Queller to counter spells and things like that. But imagine reoccurring a Skyclave Apparition. It's entered, it's exiled something, it's blocked something else and got value, and then you've gone and attacked your opponent, and then it comes back and gets that value again. I hate Skyclave Aberration. I think it's a really strong card. In Modern, the way it interacts with the board is hugely, hugely powerful. And a card like this that either returns a Lord, or returns an interactive piece like Skyclave Apparition. That's huge. That's crazy. This card's very powerful. This is definitely going to see modern play. I think you might be seeing some Jeskai Spirit decks running around very soon. I guess the downside is it's at 3 converted mana cost, and a lot of that other stuff is at 3 as well. I think the power of the creature though is significant enough that it doesn't really matter though. This is a really powerful effect, and it's definitely going to see modern play in my opinion. Alright, so here we've got another interesting card. So the front side is a 2-mana bird with Flying Vigilance. Put a 1/1 counter on each creature that entered the battlefield under your control this turn. And the other side is a human creature for 4 mana. 4 mana, 4/4. When a creature you control with a 1/1 counter on it dies, draw a card. Put a 1/1 counter on another target creature, and then Ambrose, Dean of Shadows, deals damage to that creature. And then if the creature dies, you draw a card. So this is interesting because, like, obviously humans loves having 1/1 counters on their creatures. Champion of Parish will do it to itself. And Thalia's Lieutenant will do it to the whole board. So now you've got this Shalai bird creature that essentially has an activated ability, which is Athalia's Lieutenant entering, but it only kind of happens once on creatures that enter that turn. But you know humans, it has Ether Vial, it can play things instant speed, it can then activate this and buff them up and things like that. On top of that, you imagine if you're playing humans and your opponent plays a Supreme Verdict on you, you vial this thing in response, and all of a sudden you're drawing 5 cards for that board they're wiping, and you just reload and go straight back to being a really annoying deck for them. It does have keywording of die and not leaving the battlefield, which is sort of important. So I think it's like it's kind of tricky, but it's also kind of good. And maybe if you just ignore this bird half here and look at this human half and think, is this the sort of creature that humans might splash 1 or 2 in to try and see what value they get? And it's probably not. Maybe with the 1/1 counter synergy on everything else, I think it makes it a little bit stronger. Maybe it's a sideboard card, but with the bird, maybe they have to make some adjustments to the mana base. But getting an extra Thalia's Lieutenant activation, even if it's from a bird cleric, just seems kind of good for humans. I'm sure someone that's more familiar with humans decks can weigh on this like matter a bit more significantly than I can. All right, so now we've gone and we've got another human dual-sided card. So this one I think would be more of a sideboard card, if anything. So for 2 mana, you get a 2/1 human. Whenever an opponent activates an ability that isn't a mana ability, it deals 1 damage to that player. So fetch lands, planeswalker abilities, Ether Vial, you get the gist. Stoneforge Mystic, etc. And it also has fire breathing on it, of it getting, +2 power until end of turn, and there's no limit on the amount of times you can activate that, which is kind of interesting too. So the sideboard part comes in with Revel in Silence. Opponents can't cast spells or activate abilities of planeswalkers this turn. Exile Revel in Silence. So sort of hard to cast from a human's mana base though, which as like double white, I think you'd have to go to more of like how the spirits do their mana base if you're sideboarding this card in. It's definitely not impossible though. And I thought it was an interesting card. Even if it's awkward mana-wise, it's a good one to keep in mind, in my opinion. Alright, so again, a human card. The good stuff keeps coming. So we've got Silverquill Silencer. A white-black creature. When it enters the battlefield, choose a non-land card name. Whenever an opponent casts a spell with the chosen name, they lose 3 life and you draw a card. That's kind of good. So it's sort of, has similar things to Meddling Mage, to Kitesail Freebooter. It's like an extra hate bearer in the humans deck that loses your opponent's life and draws you cards. Like, if you know your opponent's got Path to Exile, Lightning Bolt, etc., 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 they're losing life, you're drawing cards, you're advancing your board state. This card is very strong. Very, very strong. I can definitely see this getting a lot of play in Modern, just without even adjusting the mana base, just slotting it straight into the Modern deck as like a 3 or 4 of. It's also at 2 mana, and like a lot of their good cards are starting to be at 3 mana, so having a lower curve on some of these things is going to be really sweet. This is an interesting one as well, again for humans. Essentially, like once you finish emptying your hand, you could play a 1 of or a 2 of copy of Blade Historian. You could put it onto the battlefield. All of a sudden, attacking creatures you control have double strike. That is a game-winning clock. It's also sort of a win more card, but in creature matchups, it could be kind of strong. With the mana cost, it's sort of fine for a humans deck. Would be able to pay this pretty easily. Alright, Elite Spellbinder, more human love, this time at 3 mana. When it enters the battlefield, look at target opponent's hand. You may exile a non-land card from it. As long as that card remains exiled, its owner may play it. A spell cast this way costs 2 more to cast. So this is essentially like Kitesail Freebooter at 3 mana. But you get a 3-powered white flying creature. Downside of like 1 toughness being weak to Plague Engineer, but I mean, let's say you're versing a combo deck and you want more interactive cards against a combo deck. I mean, you got it right here. They might still be able to cast it for 2 mana extra, but that's not always going to be the easiest thing to do. A lot of these decks don't have... They're like... The combo decks a lot of the time will function off of having pretty exact mana curve and casting things on time and things like that. So yeah, this seems really strong and like another good toolbox card for humans. All right. So the last one here, again, more human love. I'm going to ignore the orc side of this card for a second. Let's just look at the 3 mana Augusta Dean of Order. So it's a legendary 1/3 human. Other tapped creatures you control get extra power. Other untapped creatures you control get extra toughness. Whenever you attack, untap each creature you control, then tap any number of creatures you control. Alright, so what's this card saying? It's saying when Augusta is on the battlefield, you go to your attack step, you declare your attackers. Every creature is then untapped and gets vigilance, hence it has extra toughness. You can then tap those creatures retrospectively to give them extra power. So what you're looking at is a Lord here, which also gives you the option of having creatures with vigilance. This seems very strong in creature-based matchups. Maybe you're tapping out. Like, we know how annoying Mantis Rider is in the humans deck. Imagine if they're like 7-powered champion of the parish and Thalia's lieutenant. All of a sudden, when they attack, they untap. If you're Merfolk, if you're like Jund even, like, how are you going to deal attacking back into them when all of their creatures now have vigilance? This seems like so absurdly powerful and busted. And if you're versing a combo matchup, a control deck, all of a sudden, guess what you can do? You can tap those creatures when you attack, so then it's an actual Lord that's dealing extra damage to your opponents. It seems so strong to me. The Oxide is loot a card, discard a card, then draw a card. Reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal a non-legendary, non-land card with converted mana cost of 3 or less. You may cast that card without paying its mana cost. Put all the revealed cards not cast this way on the bottom of your library in a random order. So essentially, I don't know about you, but if you're playing a humans deck, right, you've got Ancient Zygarde, which taps for any colored mana, and you've got Aether Vial. You can potentially change up your Canopy land set to have the red-white canopy land instead, or just a canopy land with red something, right? Red-blue even. It's a 4 mana effect though, which sort of makes it a little bit difficult to activate. I think for the purposes of like a humans deck, just ignore the front of this card, look at the back of this card, look at the vigilance that this gives. That's very powerful. It's like literally a mirror breaker card as well. It's really good. Really, really good. All right, guys. That's going to be it for me today. Let me know what you thought of the spoilers down below. I'm so sorry, Boggles family, that we didn't get any love once again. But yeah, do you guys agree with what I said? Did I miss any cards? Do you disagree with some of the cards? Am I reaching that little bit too far? As always, let me know, guys. Have a great day. I'll see you next time. Catch you tomorrow. Thanks.